Hello, I'm Catherine. Welcome back to my garden in Oxfordshire in about the middle of April at the moment. And today I want to talk about this lovely stuff, which is my Bokashi compost. It's quite different from other sorts of composting you might be familiar with, and it's taken me a year or so to really get the hang of it and find out what works the best for how I do it. And this is really supercharged compost. You actually have to mix it with old dead compost because it would just be almost too rich on its own. So this is the finished product, which is this gorgeous, gorgeous stuff, fully broken down, apart from the odd thing like avocado stones. But if you're used to composting, you know that they take quite a while to break down whatever sort of composting you do. And the sort of thing I might use it for is something like this. I've got these, what's a watering can, wobbling in the wind. I've got these slightly tender chrysanthemum. I had them in the greenhouse for some of the winter when it was really cold, but then they've just been on my terrace in quite a sheltered spot with some fleece over it. But now I asked for some advice on Instagram because I'm quite new to growing these, and the consensus was you want to cut it down so it sort of regenerates a bit. You could, I mean normally, and I'm still quite tempted to make cuttings from the bits that I cut off, but I'm just trying to tell myself I haven't got any more room either in the greenhouse or in the garden for extra ones, and when you think that they take a bit of looking after because you can't just leave them out over winter, I'm going to try and be strict with myself and not grow any more. But I want to make these plants good and ready, so I'm going to put them up to a bigger size pot, and I'm going to mix in some regular compost, but some of the Bokashi as well, because as I say, it will supercharge it. Other things that I use it for, I used it on my sweet peas, and I made a video about that when the Bokashi comes into it, so I'll link it up here if you haven't seen that one. And last year I topped all my tomatoes, ones that I was growing in pots either in the greenhouse or on the terrace. I topped that with a good layer of Bokashi, and I just had loads of tomatoes. This is what I do with the final result, so I'll just go back and show you how I make it. I've got my scraps from the kitchen, pretty much how you'd normally save scraps, but two things. One is that you can put absolutely anything in it. You can have fatty stuff, you can have liquidy stuff, you can put meat in, you can even put bones. And the other point is that I try and cut things quite small. So if you buy a set, it's a good idea to get two, and they often do come, these two, they're just buckets really, but they have a reservoir at the bottom, so the fluid drains out and then you can collect it. I'll talk about that in a minute, because although moist is okay, you don't want it swimming in liquid. And the other important thing that you often get, I bought the two buckets and the enriched bran, and this is the magic stuff that you need. It's known as EMS, effector of microorganisms, but most people just call it bran, and it's sort of regular bran that's been inoculated with, as it says, the microorganisms, and they're what gets to work pickling your food. I'm not sure if I explained that very well. Because what you do, you add a layer of about an inch, and then you scatter a handful of the bran, and you think, oh, I'm going to get through that quickly. But it's amazing how long it lasts. So the other things that come with your kit are this, so that you can drain off the liquid, and this, although you could just improvise something, and this is for compressing the food. They end up being quite heavy because you can fit a lot in. Because this is an anaerobic technique, you want to keep as much air out as possible. You're not supposed to sort of leave the lid off too long when you're doing it, and you, as I say, you compress it as much as possible. That's how it differs from regular compost, where you need a flow of oxygen, and every so often you have to fork it over. So let me show you. So this one's nearly full, but I can fit another layer in. And you can see how last time I had some bread and I cut that up quite small. And if you see this white mould, that's a good sign, that's what you want. And I can't fib, it does have quite a strong smell, but it doesn't smell of rotten food. It's quite sweet, but also quite sort of vinegary at the same time. So you can, you can really believe that fermentation is happening. So all you have to do, it's got some of the bran from last time, so I'm going to put all of this in there. I'm just compressing that down as much as possible. Then I just get a handful of the bran and sprinkle it over, and then let that get to work. So I thought couldn't get any more in, but I might be able to get another layer in. It's amazing how when you compress things you can get more in. So that's one that's on the go, although nearly finished. And then, oh, there's some bits just over there. And then what you do, I actually keep them in a utility room. I think you just don't want them to get frozen, but they're sealed. I mean, if you do this indoors, you get a bit of a whiff as you're changing it. Ellie usually comes and has a look. I'm surprised she hasn't today. But honestly, that you could keep them in the kitchen if you've got room. But I think a shed would equally be fine, and they're pretty much protected from rodents in this. And then what I do is I fill up one, keep that indoors while I'm filling up the other one. And what you can do is start to drain off the liquid. Now, I haven't done this for a while. I've been a bit remiss, so there's probably quite a lot. But because I want to do the next stage with it, I will collect it. It isn't exactly a feed. I think they call it a soil inoculant because it helps feed the bacteria and all the other microorganisms that are already in the soil or in your compost. So it does that rather than directly feeds the plants. But obviously that's a really good thing. And it doesn't last that long. I'm not sure exactly what the shelf life is, but I try to use it all within a couple of weeks. So you just need to put it under there, open it up, and it comes out quite fast. So that's a measure of 100 millilitres. So then if you put that in a 10-litre watering can, that's about the right. But you can see quite a lot came out because I haven't been draining it off. So I'll just do that a bit. Okay, well, that did have a lot. I've got 7 measures off there, so I will get using that. As I say, it doesn't have a very long shelf life, so I'll get using that in various ways around the garden. So let me show you one that's been maturing for a couple of months, I suppose it is. I often put a layer of paper on top, just to try and keep the air out, and you can still definitely see it's food at this stage, but it's broken down quite a lot. It's quite soggy, and there aren't really any sort of discernible shapes. And at this stage you've got a choice. You can, if you're doing something in the garden, say like growing beans or sweet peas, you could put this in the trench at the bottom, as long as you're sure you haven't got animals around that might eat it. You can add it to your regular compost and mix it in really well. But another alternative is something called a soil factory, and that's what I've decided to do. I bought these online, these tins, because I wanted to keep them rodent proof. I drilled holes at the bottom, and because it's so rich, it's good to mix it with something else. So what's recommended is old compost. So if you've got an old grow bag, or what I do every time I put on some seedlings and maybe some of them haven't germinated, I keep that compost to one side along with at the end of the season when you're taking out old plants, you put the roots, cut up the roots for the compost heap, and I keep the compost and keep it all in a corner over there so that I can mix it half. So what I'm going to do now is mix half and half with the old spent compost and the Bokashi. So put into it. So I just do it in layers. I'll take the newspaper off and then I'm going to add this in. And if you look at that now, you'll never think it's going to break down in just a few weeks so that you can't see any of those bits, but that is what happens. And mine looks quite brown because we put quite a lot of tea and coffee in it. You have to be careful that you don't put too much coffee grains, and I'm a little bit worried there might be a bit too much in this because I think it can be a bit too acidic. So you just build up the layers. Ellie's being very good. She usually comes sniffing around because there's nothing she likes more than rancid food. Well, it's not really rancid. It's pickled. So it takes a little time to do this, but I think it's definitely worth it because you get to use things in your kitchen. We have a waste bin from the council and we very rarely use it these days because everything, the sort of bigger, fleshier stuff goes on the regular compost heap. And what's good actually is that you sort of keep the more nutrient dense food for this, but you don't want to put anything that's too watery or too fibrous because the higher the sort of calorific content of the food, the more nutritious it's going to be. So it's a good way of using the more valuable things that you're chucking out. So I'm about halfway up now. So it's amazing how much you can get in there. I mean, I've still got about a third there, but because, as I say, you compress it, you can get an awful lot in. And I've seen some people do it, you know, like have like half a dozen bins if you're a family and you produce a lot of stuff. We had quite a lot of old sort of cereals when we were having a sort out, so there's quite a lot of that in here, which we sort of mixed every time we put other food in and coffee grains. It's a good mix. So now you can see this will come out. It's just a shelf with perforation so the liquid can go to the bottom. And I'll just rinse this out. I'll rinse it out well, but I won't use any washing up liquid or anything, just with water so that nothing else gets in it. And then I start again. And it's a bit difficult to give exact times of how long it takes because it's going to take longer when the weather's cold and quicker when it's warm weather. But what I find is that once I've filled up another bucket and it's time to decant from that into one of these, pretty much it's ready to be used in the garden. Right, I think that will do. And then if you're really worried about rodents, you can put a brick or something on top to stop them getting in. There we have it. So now I've got this lovely, really nutritious compost. I'm going to use it to top dress this chrysanthemum. You can use it in the beds as well, especially if it's fully broken down. I did find at the beginning I put it into one of my beds, and it wasn't fully broken down before I started doing the soil factory method. And not only did rodents find it, but I don't know if you can see in the background, silly fluffy dog behind me found it as well. And then we got slightly worried about what she might, because I think there were some grapes in it, and you're not supposed to give grapes to dogs. Luckily she was okay. So after that I read up about making soil factories and got these sealed in cans so that they're protected from both the rodents and the silly dogs. So thanks so much for watching, and if you could like or subscribe, that would be great. And I'll see you again soon with some more tales from the garden. Thank you for watching.